Hello, and welcome to our lesson on adding and subtracting mixed numbers. Today you will learn how to add and subtract mixed numbers by using 4 steps. The 4 steps that are needed are 1. Find a least common multiple for your least common denominator. The second step, make equivalent fractions with the given numbers. Next, you will add or subtract the numbers depending on if it's a addition symbol, plus symbol, or a minus symbol. And last but not least, always remember to simplify or reduce your fraction in your answer, if it's needed. Let's start with 23 and 3/6 minus 11 and 1/8. Remember, the first thing is to find your least common denominator. The way you're going to find that least common denominator is list your multiples of the denominators. And when you're listing your multiples, basically you're listing the answers to the multiplication of that number. In this case, we have 6's. 6 times 1 is 6. 6 times 2 is 12. 6 times 3 is 18. 6 times 4 is 24. And 6 times 5 is 30. Most of the time, if you list at least 5 of the top and bottom number, most of the time you'll come up with a least common denominator. Sometimes, however, you have to keep listing until you come up with a common number. Now let's move to our 8. 8 times 1 is 8. 8 times 2 is 16. 8 times 3 is 24. 8 times 4 is 32. And 8 times 5 is 40. Now, between these two lists, do you see any numbers in common? See that we have a 24 in common, which means that would be, and is there anything lower than those two numbers? No, it isn't. We always go with our least common denominator. So in this case, our least common denominator will be 24. So I'm going to place the 24 as my denominator for that number and 24 as my least common denominator for that one. Now, the second step says to make equivalent fractions with the given. The way you make equivalent fractions is look at the denominator on the left and then look at your denominator on the right and find out what number can be multiplied times the left denominator to give you the answer to the right denominator. In the first one, 6 times what number gives you 24? Okay, we know that 6 times 4 is 24. 8 times what number gives you 24? Well, we know 8 times 3 is 24. Okay, whenever you are making your equivalent fractions, if you multiply, we're looking back at the denominator of the 6, and we have decided that 6 times 4 is 24. If you multiply the 4 on the bottom, whatever you do to the bottom of that fraction, you must do to the top. So if we multiply times 4 on the bottom, we got to also multiply times 4 on the top. 3 times 4 gives us a 12. And remember to bring that whole number over. That 23, just bring it right over there. Now we have 23 and 12 24ths. Okay, just like we did on the top fraction, we'll do on the bottom. If we multiply times 3 on the bottom, we must multiply times 3 on the top in order to make that equivalent fraction. And that 1 times 3 is 3. And remember to bring that 11 over, that whole number. Now we have 23 and 12 24ths minus 11 and 3 24ths. If you notice, now we have a common denominator. The only way you can add or subtract numbers, fractions, is to have a common denominator. Okay, now the first thing we'll do is just subtract those two whole numbers of 23 and 11. 3 minus 1 is 2, and 2 minus 1 is 1. Then you can go and subtract the numerators only, but your denominator stays the same. Remember, you just made those equivalent fractions, and you have a common denominator. So you'll need that same common denominator in your answer. So I'll just go ahead and bring the 24 down. And at this point, we just need to subtract the 12 minus the 3, those two numerators. And 12 minus 3 is 9. So our final answer is 12 and 9/24. The next number is 23 and 5/8 plus 11 and 2/6. We have an 8 as a denominator in the first number and a 6 as a denominator in the second number. If my memory serves me correctly, and I'm just going to backtrack, we had an 8 and a 6 in the last one, so we already know that our common denominator is 24. In this case, we don't have to list those multiples because we already know. Let's go ahead and put our common denominator over here. And the next step is to make equivalent fractions. Well, 6 times 4 is 24, which means 2 times 4 here is 8. Remember I said whatever you do to the bottom of the fraction, you must do to the top. At the top fraction, 8 times 3 is 24. And we have to multiply 5 times 3, which will give us 15. Once again, whatever you do to the bottom of the fraction, you have to do to the top. What do we have to do next? Okay, we have to bring over our whole numbers, 23, and the other whole number, 11. There is a plus symbol, so we basically need to add. Let's add those whole numbers, 23 and 11. 3 and 1 is 4. 2 and 1 is 3. 5 and 8 is 13. Carry your 1. 1 and 1 is 2. So we added our numerators and our denominator stays the same. That gives us an answer of 34 and 23/24. Let's try another one. Remember, the first step is to find a least common denominator. We have a 6 as a denominator in the first fraction, and we have a 3 as a denominator in the next one. So we can list our multiples. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. 6, 12, 18. 6 times 4 is 24. 6 times. Do we have anything in common? Yes, I see that we have a 6 in common. That is our lowest number, so 6 will be our least common denominator. 3 times what number gives you 6? 3 times 2. And if we multiply 2 on the bottom, we must multiply 2 on the top. 1 times 2 is 2. 6 times what number gives you 6? We all know that's 1. That's a given. 6 times 1 is 6, which means 3 times 1 is 3. And we need to bring over our whole numbers. And I see a minus symbol, which means we have to subtract. 10 minus 4 is 6. 3 minus 2 is 1. And our denominator stays the same. That gives us a final answer of 6 and 1/6. We have another problem so that we can practice and just get used to it. This time we have a 3 and an 8 as our denominators. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 4 is 12. And 3 times 5 is 15. 8 times 1 is 8. 8 times 2 is 16. 8 times 3 is 24. 8 times 4 is 32. And 8 times 5 is 40. Let's check and see. Do we see anything in common? No, we don't. So let's keep listing with our 3s. We were on 5. 3 times 6 is 18. Continue to look down and see if you have anything in common. 3 times 7 is 21. 3 times 8 is 24. And I see something. I see a 24 here and I see a 24 there, but I'm checking to make sure we don't have anything lower from the top list and the bottom list that is in common. And I don't see anything. So our least common denominator here would be a 24. Okay, we know that 8 times 3 is 24. And if we multiply times 3 on the bottom, we must multiply times 3 on the top. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times what number is 24? 8. 3 times 8. And we have to multiply times 8 on the top. So 2 times 8 is 16. We need to bring over our whole numbers of 10 and our whole number of 4. 10 minus 4 is 6. 16 minus 9 is 7. And our common denominator of 24 stays the same. And we are done. We have a final answer of 6 and 7/24. And that concludes our lesson on adding and subtracting mixed numbers.